welcome into Arcfall. Welcome into M85. Welcome into, what is it? Retribution? Something?
Retribution, part two, rated R.
Part Dose. Appreciate you guys all being here. My name is UltimatDJz, joined by Griffin and mad scientist Jules Verne this morning on this Arcfall special. Apologies for running late this morning. I think what it is I'm still on Central Time. If you look at Central Time, I'm right on time. All right. So yeah, everything's great. Jules, good morning to you. Appreciate you guys being here. Crazy weather that we got yesterday. Not going to waste any time with Fluffer here. We'll talk about it later on tonight on the show. But yeah, I've spent the last hour just trying to get my vehicle on the roadway, which is absolutely crazy. And then didn't have internet, and then we got hammered up with snow over the last 12 hours. So, but I do appreciate everybody hanging in and everybody being there. And yes, I actually am on the road trying to get into work because I'm a dedicated employee. That's how it goes.
That's cute.
But,
that's cute.
Yeah, absolutely. However, speaking of dedication, we do have Griffin here back in the studio. Thank you very much. And we've got mad scientist Jules Verne here to tell us all about Retribution Part 2. We talked a little bit last night about Elite Outpost. We talked about Fleet Commander Cisco. We talked about the skills. We talked about the buffs. But we didn't have a lot of the intricate data. As a matter of fact, I teased a lot last night, Jules, about the buffs and whether or not the Fleet Command team was actually going to be able to turn the buffs into something that players might be interested in. We also talked a little bit about the economy reset with regards to Fleet Commanders and Sigma Fleet Commander credits, which is another disappointing item that players see in the game this morning. But there could be some game design reasons for that. We're going to discuss those a little bit as well. But first of all, good morning to you, Jules. Welcome in. What is your first reaction here to Elite Outpost and Fleet Commander Cisco?
Well, I'd say the first reaction is that I think I see a lot of value in Fleet Commander Cisco. There's a lot of skills, both within the Outpost loop itself, but outside, that I find a lot of intrigue in and that I'll be gunning for eventually down the road. So I'm kind of excited for that. I'm excited for the newer challenge of the Elite Outposts. They are more difficult and they are more rewarding. So I'm interested to kind of dive into those as well.
We did mention last night that if a commander was focused on plunder as a currency reward, then these new Elite Outposts are certainly going to pay more of that, as it is now confirmed, Jules, that plunder will start dropping from hostile number 1. And when I say hostile, I mean retribution attacker number 1, or retaliation attacker, that is. No longer do we have to wait 42 hostiles to get through to start earning plunder. We start earning plunder now on hostile number 1, but we will pay the price with increased repair cost and increased difficulty in trying to tackle the outpost and get through there. We did see some nice skills buried in Fleet Command Cisco there. Some of the dependencies are still yet to kind of be determined, and obviously the Sigma Fleet Commander credits are going to be probably what I would imagine to be one of the most significant holdups for players, as we're not able to use the massive banks of Fleet Commander credits that we've gotten built up from Borg solo armadas. And Jules, obviously, as disappointing as that is, it's obviously very much intended. Whether or not it was necessary is another conversation, but certainly intended, and from a design standpoint, does give Fleet Command the opportunity to have some future design space when it comes to Fleet Commanders. One of the biggest things that they said to us when we were asking about the Sigma Fleet Commander credits, which we all were very much opposed to, was simply that the banks of millions and millions of Fleet Commander credits that had already existed were pretty much an economy buster. That was old content that was broken. By using the Sigma Commander credits and the cap, Jules, which we saw, and very not happy with a cap. I know players hate caps on their currencies, but it does preserve future game design space and the economy, so that once you're done with Fleet Commander Cisco, for example, then your Sigma Fleet Commander credits are still going to hit a cap, which means you won't be able to bank up millions, and they'll be able to use this currency in the future. Logically, while I understand preserving future design space, with this currency. It is still frustrating. However, they did provide a small, maybe token output of using our existing Fleet Commander credits with a converter. Jules, do we have the math on the Sigma Fleet Commander converter?
I didn't see a converter.
There's a converter?
There's a converter?
There is indeed. There is indeed. And you know what? Okay, so I didn't know if you had seen this yet or not.
I have it in game. Epic Fleet Commander credits to Sigma Commander credits. It's right here. It's in the very beginning.
Well, and I'll tell you this, Jules. This was not present during our original game design meetings. It was discussed. So I wanted to confirm with you, and here we're doing it live. Now, you know it's live. This is actually not necessarily a bad thing, because I'll tell you, and Jules can tell you as well, this was not in the original design specs. So this was added in. This is absolutely based on some of the feedback offered by some players. So I'm glad to see it. It is a slow drip. It will give us an opportunity to use some of those old Fleet Commander credits and converting over to the new one. And it is a very slow drip. If I'm not mistaken, we saw 500 traditional credits translate into 20 of the Sigma Fleet Commander credits. But the fact that it's here at all is probably to be appreciated, Jules, as it was not in the original design specs.
Well, specifically, it's the Epic Fleet Commander credits for row 5. Epic Fleet Commander credits, 500 to 20.
520. That's 20% to 40% more than what you can get through the Plunder Refinery. And for players who are going to struggle to make enough plunder to do all of the things they need to get from that refinery to fuel Fleet Commander Cisco, this is actually a lifeline. So I actually kind of praise the fact that it exists at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It was not in the original design, so I'm glad that it's there. And as we're looking at a brand new currency, obviously more is more. So even if the conversion looks slow, and it will be, then at least it is there. And as Jules mentions, about a 20 to 30% lift over what's available through your plunder redemption. And for those players who do have significant banks, well, then it will allow you progression at about 20 to 30% faster. So we do see the Fleet Commander credits there that are being used. Fleet Commander Cisco starts out at Ops 51. That's where you'll start be able to earn his shards for free here on day one through Plunder Refinery. And you can do that with the existing traditional outposts by earning your plunder and or using going up against the elites. But you can use your plunder currency to redeem Fleet Commander Cisco shards if indeed you're not going to pay for him today. As Jules mentioned, there are 3 different tracks, as with all Fleet Commanders, and there are some skills embedded in all of these that obviously some are fluff, but some of these, as we identified last night, are pretty good, Jules. As we're taking a look at the Fleet Commander tree, is there anything specific that you would like to point out at a high level?
Yeah, so I got a few facts here, just laid some ground rules or some ground game here. So first about his upgrade cost entirely. So we will have to spend rare and epic Fleet Commander credits. We are no longer spending the common or uncommon, I can't remember which one, that was used on previous ones. Rares and epics come from the Borg solos. Epics only come when you're Ops 51 plus. So another way of gating to make sure that this is only Ops 51 content. That is going to be about 50% more than we've seen in other Fleet Commanders. That's not really a big problem since most people have a large bank of that. The introduction to the Sigma Fleet Commander credits is the new thing, obviously, and there's a total of 29,090 of those to max Cisco. That's taking them all the way up to rank 20. Now, before adding the calculation of this extra 20%, it was about 300 to 600 days to max it through the Plunder Refinery only. So that's a pretty slow drip in order to max that. And that, I think, is going to be the biggest bottleneck that we will see getting to a certain skill level. And as I kind of point out these skills, I'll also point out what the rank requirements are, and then what my early estimation for players who are maxing that Sigma faction, Sigma Fleet Commander credit refinery bundle can actually get to. So, and there's another thing too, the skill cost, the skill point costs. Everything's got to be higher. In all other Fleet Commanders, we've typically seen a total of 140,000 skill points required to max all of their skills. Here, we're seeing over 250,000. So it is an increase of about 80% more. There is skill point efficiencies in 3 different spots that can give you up to 57% efficiency, making that total down to about 160,000. That's still about 500 to 1,000 days to max just through the Plunder Refinery alone. Now, you will get 23,000 from maxing him, but again, no one's going to max him right away. So that's also going to be another slow drip of skill points as you're able to rank and then level up the fleet commander. So that's the upgrade cost. Have I scared anybody yet?
I'm curious, what was the fleet commander skill cost for Fleet Commander Khan? I know that we had talked about him being increased when he came out. He was increased above Janeway, and you're right, they always end up costing more as the economy for skill points kind of expands. Interestingly, with the skill points, they're not, I mean, they are grindable, but they're their own type of grind. So it's not like we're using any existing skill points currency in order to be able to upgrade this. We are earning it all with plunder. What is the comparison to Fleet Commander Khan as compared to what Cisco looked like here?
Khan was average. He was about 140,000. He was not increased. Janeway, when she was released, was increased, but she also had an increased cost of the rare skill points. So they actually went back and corrected and actually lowered all of her skill point requirements. But she also had rare. So she's only had 131,000, less than 10% difference between the two, but had a ton of rare to deal with as well, which was a choke point at the time. When Khan came out, he was exactly average as everybody else. So this is the first fleet commander that is drastically different in their total skill point cost. I say that with a heavy grain of salt because we always say, hey, pick and choose what you want out of this tree. You're not going to max all of the trees all at the same time. Plus, there's going to be nodes in here that you're never going to touch at all. And I'll start diving into those nodes because after you get Cisco and after you max this particular skill, you'll never do another Cardassian or Borg outpost again unless you really want those buffs. And those two skills that help you counter those two outposts are now useless. So those are 2 skills you never have to max. So that's kind of what I'm pointing to is we can't just look at the 80% inflated cost and say, well, this is outrageous. It's going to take me so much longer to max Cisco. We're never talking about masking Cisco. We're talking about now, what is the exact cost to get to the exact trait or skill that I really want?
Yeah,
one of the things that I like about this particular design is exactly probably what Griffin was getting ready to mention there. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Is the choice that Mr. Tiger likes to build into a lot of his game design, which is you're going to choose a path. And Jules, I would imagine that there are, while there are some prerequisites built into these trees, a lot of these particular skills do span across the 3 trees. For example, in the 3rd tree, we do see and identified last night a decent material efficiency for G7 uncommon materials in station building. And I know that players, especially G7 players, are probably going to want to be chasing towards that. You also, over in the 1st tree, have an active ability, which I find to be very, very interesting. The active ability for Fleet Commander Cisco is basically an instantaneous field repair for all ships in your fleet, including those that are holding a territory or holding an outpost. So, for example, that skill can get up to 25%. It starts relatively low, and it will be a very expensive skill. But this particular Fleet Commander active ability, which will require you to have him seated in seat number 1, is essentially a field repair for all deployed ships, Jules.
Yes. Yeah, he's a field repair for all deployed ships and including outposts. And they actually put that in the description as well to say that it's including outposts, because that was not something that the field repairs could do prior to this active ability. So this is a new active ability that also helps the outpost loot. I have a set of 5 that I'd like to run through with you. But a set of 5 skills that I think are the key skills to look at early on. First one being, it's called Psionic Defense. And what it does is it 100% nullifies the node outpost ability. If you remember, what that does is essentially stripping away your whole health every time you completed an attack. There was no way of countering that, so you could never complete all 72 ways of a node outpost, making that a just completely useless outpost for all players. The Psionic defense 100% nullifies that, meaning it basically doesn't have a ship ability. The Cardassian, which is Apex Barrier, you need a lot of Apex Shred. There's buffs for that. There'll be a new skill here for that, but you will still have to counter some amount of Apex Barrier. There'll still be some barrier there. Same with the Borg and Arcelitic defense and damage. You're still going to get some damage that comes through. Now with the Psionic defense, you're saying, hey, here's an outpost that doesn't have any ship ability, meaning it will now become the easiest outpost to do. So if you are not concerned about activating any buffs, which 90% of the time is going to be the case, maybe 99%, then after completing this to the specific level that counters the outpost level you are targeting, you will be able to completely nullify that and make that the easiest one. To get to rank 3 is how to start that event. So that it starts at level 1, 2%, and goes up from there. To get to rank 3, about 9 days worth of Sigma faction credits. Or sorry, I keep saying faction credits. Sigma fleet commander credits.
And then
Too many Sigma credits.
And then once you have that unlocked and the node is completely nullified, to your point, Jules, a few moments ago, not really a whole bunch of reason to do a Borg or a Cardassian outpost once you have these new nodes licked. So while, yes, DJs was driving at their R3 skill trees, tactician, combatant, mechanic skill tree, they'll have some good things in them. Specifically, what Cisco will help you with the Borg and with the Cardassians, I mean, we can save our loot on that if we just go for the node. Isn't that the point that you were trying to make?
Yeah, it basically is a cheat code for the actual outposts themselves. And that's why I'm picking this skill out as the number 1 skill to look at first and to target and to save all your skill points until you can get there. In order for it to be useful versus the 73s, which I know, Griffin, you're going to target very early on, takes about 29 days through the normal. And this is, by the way, assuming that you are double pulling your Sigma credits bundle. That may not be possible for all players. So I'm going to be very specific that I'm saying sourcing through the store and not free to play. Because sourcing through the refinery may require you to be at a certain level that is no longer free to play, or may require you to have primes upgraded. So, but not buying specific packs for these credits, but just going through the normal drips. These are rough timetables. The second skill would be the loot boost. Because you boost the loot, you become much easier for people to pull those bundles. Now, you need rank 7 to actually start any of those currencies, and that's going to be roughly a month and a half before you can actually get started on those. And if you want to max those and get full 200% boosts against your currencies, that's going to be about 10 months to max that particular skill, to get to that rank, to then max that skill. So it's a little bit of a stretch, but I think any loot gain is good, particularly against plunder and particularly against the credits. The active ability.
One thing that I would like to point out with these skills and with the timelines, as Jules mentions, there's a lot of variability here. Whether or not you've got a sufficient bank of the fleet commander credits, the traditional ones that you're going to be using in the converter, and how much plunder you may have saved up. Those two things are going to be very key factors. But I'll also remind you, at least during this month, we are going to see some minor acceleration there, Jules, as some event rewards and even the battle pass will contain Fleet Commander Cisco's skill points as well.
Yeah. 3 other skills to quickly go through. The active ability, Field Repair, rank 9 to start, and that's about 2.5 months. Or to max it is about 10 months. Now, we know the cooldown at max is 1 hour, so that's really fast, and you can actually activate that multiple times during one outpost interaction. The next skill is adding a ship to your actual available ship slots. That means we can have up to 4 now. So having the Outpost Control Center building to 40 and having this skill unlocked will give you up to 4 ships in the Outpost. That starts at rank 13, or about 4 months to get there. Then the last one I think that a lot of G7 players will be talking about would be the Uncommon Station Cost Efficiency. Rank 13 to start as well, so 4 months. and up to 10 months to be able to max one of those. So those are some key skills and some rough timetables of how to get there just through the refinery alone.
One of the things that I wanted to point out here, especially again with the timelines, is the timelines that are being presented also, Griffin, are going to require player priority and player choice. For example, if I save and invest completely into the G7 uncommon material efficiency, then I'm not investing into the active ability or vice versa. So, for example, when we're talking about native timelines, we're talking approximately 9 to 10 months per skill when we're talking about maxing these out. And of course, that is a very, very early timeline. I do not expect that it will take years to max out this fleet commander, as we're going to see more plunder skill points. We're going to see other skill points and future sourcing come along the way. But in true Mr. Tiger design, Griffin, we're seeing definitely some priority placed on player choice here early.
Yeah, he loves choice, and there are many different ways to play the game. I could see, based on what we have in terms of these elite solo outpost variables that we can turn on and turn off, they are more tempting than they were last month.
Well, regarding the buffs, however, Fleet Commander Cisco, which I thought that was what Griffin was pointing at, does actually have some PvP skills that will be effective in arenas. So you've got two different areas of PvP improvement here. Jules is right. You cannot hold an outpost during an arena. So the buffs, again, are very lackluster, in my opinion, very disappointing, unless Jules has a surprise for me. But with regards to the skills that are contained within Fleet Commander Cisco, those will be effective in arenas and any other form of PvP combat. So as we were looking through last night and seeing some of these with some extra Apex barrier against players and some extra Apex shred against players. Listen, shred, as much as we dislike that mechanic, shred is relatively effective, and that ability or that skill contained within Fleet Commander Cisco will prove helpful in arenas. However, the buffs that we are holding from the Outpost, those will continue to be non-essential. And Jules, while we're on this topic very briefly, do we have any good news when it comes to the Elite Outpost buff tree?
So what I'd like to point our listeners who are not driving in cars at this moment, go over to the graphics room. DJ's posted a link to the Outpost spreadsheet, and it's already been updated. There is a tab called, I think it's Outpost Buffs. I'm not looking at it right now. Outpost Buffs that you can go in there, and I actually included some of the tree. Now, I haven't included all levels of all buffs. I do have that information, and I will include that at some other point. But I've just included what's the max level. Now, a couple things to note. The regular Outpost had their buffs max out at 10. And they had requirements for outpost level to reach in order to take one of those skills up to 10. I think the highest requirement was outpost level 25. And just a quick lesson of what that actually means. You get outpost level 1 for free, just from actually attacking and capturing the outpost. To get to additional levels, it means actually adding a level to any buff. So it doesn't really matter which buff you do, that adds to your outpost level. However, if you want to max one particular one, for instance, probably the more valuable ones in the tree, then you would actually need to upgrade a bunch of other buffs that you probably don't want at all. That's what makes it pretty complicated. So if we're looking at the new elite outposts, those max out at level 15. And to reach that level 15 requires you to have outpost level 35. So you're actually maxing about 1.5 of these buffs in order to get the one that you actually want at the value you want. So let's just we talked about PvP, so let's just take a look at Apex Shred from PvP from a level 70 outpost. Now, that maxes out at 70% Apex Shred versus players. That's actually pretty good. To reach that level, that 70%, will require you to also max something else. Now, that could be the crit damage from versus PvP. That maxes out at 400%. And it could also be adding some isolatic damage or Apex Barrier versus your node outpost. So you're not just getting the 70% Apex Shred from maxing that, you're also getting some crit damage. Now, unfortunately, not only do we see increased buff values, we see increased costs. So all of our component costs are vastly increased. And also, don't worry, they still included the Sigma resources and base resources as a additional cost element as well.
Great.
Yep. So being able to max an Apex Shred will probably cost you 500,000 Sigma dilithium.
Wow. You know, one thing that I noticed during the traditional Outpost last month, Jules, was while we were obviously looking at maxing these buffs and we were looking at the skill cost, or the cost, I shouldn't say skill, we were looking at the cost in the Outpost core components, the Outpost currency, the common, uncommon, and rare of those components to upgrade these buffs. We do obviously look at it in a max style, but I'm curious from the audience, and I can't see the chat right now, but Griffin, while players were engaging with traditional Outpost, I wonder how many players actually went through to max those buffs. I found myself not maxing the buffs, but maybe taking level 5 or level 6, maybe level 7, depending on some of the currency that I had, to get some benefit, although it wasn't going to be maxed. I think that could be some design intent here. Is obviously, while we're the min-max community and we look for trying to max a skill, it may be that maxing it is not necessarily what's in our best interest right now, efficiency or math-wise as far as cost, but being able to get some benefit there, Jules. Do you find that these buffs scale in such a way that some benefit is better than no benefit, or is a max required in order to really show any efficacy?
No, I think that there's going to be definitely some benefit, particularly when we're looking at the buffs against that particular type. Now, I will say, like, if we are following key strategies here, you've unlocked Fleet Commander Cisco, you've gotten the Psionic defense up, and you are going against the node, and you're not worried about their ship ability. What can help extend your battles and make you last longer, make you survive more attackers, is going to be activating the Apex barrier versus that node. So it's certainly going to help. I think what's going to be interesting is the balance between, is it worth the cost in order to get that skill or that buff up enough, because it's going to start costing quite a bit of Sigma par steel, a total of 2.5 million to max that particular buff. Is it worth spending a few 100,000 Sigma par steel in order to make you last maybe 3 or 4 more attackers? I think that's kind of where the balance is going to be with these. And in the honest, like, if you're not running any buffs, well, then you have a bunch of components you're not using. So really, it's almost more like a sunk cost. Like, why aren't you activating buffs if you have the currency to do so, and it may improve maybe by 1 or 2 attackers or reduce your repair cost? I mean, even that alone may be worthwhile. So
yeah, and one of the things that I'd like to point out, this was actually something that we kind of tinkered with a little bit last month, and not super huge, but just looking at strategy. One of the old things, Jules, that we used to look at, for example, with armadas, was your peak efficiency with an armada, punching up high enough so that, particularly in a group armada, punching up high enough so that everybody died except for one player who barely survived. I think that we could see a potential return of that level of thought coming into these outposts. For example, if I'm punching down to an outpost and I'm currently only running 2 ships, but if I get to the end of all 72 and one ship is dead and one ship has 5 or 10% hull health, then I have pretty much maxed that efficiency. Now, if I can use these buffs to be able to punch up, or if I can use these buffs to get me to the level of where I can hit the next level of outpost and still have one ship that barely survives. For example, I'm saying that if you engage in an outpost and you finish and you still have all of your ships alive, well, then you probably weren't punching high enough to begin with. So these buffs, while maybe not huge in what they look like on their values, it should be noted that the incremental change in your results are what you're probably going to be targeting here. And so Jules is absolutely right. When you're looking at the balance, is it necessary to max the buff? Probably not. But is there a level of buff that balances your cost investment of soft resources as well as the outpost components? Is there a balance there in what I can spend to barely or just enough allow me to complete the objective that I've got set for that outpost. Especially with these new elites that are now dropping plunder from hostile number 1. You may not need to do all 72 hostiles in order for you to get a reasonable payoff.
That's very true. And remember, with the new elite node outpost, that apex barrier is not a small number. G5 maxes at 20,000, G6 maxes at 40,000, and then G7, if you take it up to the 80s, 60,000. Obviously, we're not doing that today. But adding, 20, 25, 30, 35 apex barrier to a almost maxed in your generation outpost is really going to make a difference in how many rounds you're lasting.
Another buff that I would like to point out is the Cardassian buffs, because they're essentially galaxy exocomps, in which by activating that and then sending a ship out, they will actually stay activated even after the outpost is completed. Specifically looking at the cargo, the mining speed, the hazard protection. I think those were the key ones there. I think also hostile loot, however, that will expire at the end of your outpost. So you could activate those, get a little bit more cargo. Let's say you're doing, full cargo runs in token space. If you're still running in token space, particularly for G5 players and early G6 players who have protected token space in their server, that can be really helpful just to eke out a little more cargo out of each token. So there certainly is some value, even if you do not max those buffs. I did want to kind of get into the value of Elite Outpost as it pertains to their refinery as well, if you're ready to kind of talk through that.
Sure.
Absolutely. Let's transition over into retaliation medals, which obviously now we know Jules has a little bit of a renewed importance, especially when we talk about the status control officers. The retaliation medals are required for tiering these officers, and we'll transition to those here in just a few moments. But the refinery currency is probably a little bit more important this month than it was last month with regards to retaliation medals and plunder.
Yeah, and there is a new type of outpost credit. So the regular outpost credits were redeemed for a resource and materials bundle that was relevant to your grade. And you could pick and choose which grade you wanted to choose if you were higher than G5. That was really useful. Now they have a new credit type. This will drop from the initial outpost interaction, so the very first defeating the outpost itself. That elite credit will drop a new exchange, and that exchange is roughly 4 times the value of the regular exchange, further increasing how you're going to strategize what loot you're going to actually target during each of these interactions. So I think that's really interesting to look at as saying maybe, I'm running the regulars for medals, but I'm running the elites for the credits, or vice versa. It's going to be interesting to see. That is a different credit type entirely, so you're not like competing for where you're spending that one resource. Additionally, this is actually new as of this morning. I did not know that they had added reputation bundles in as well that require the new elite credits. As far as I can tell, though, at Ops 71, it's only offering 30 billion per redeem. I don't know how valuable that is in the grand scheme of things. We actually recently had a nice long chat about faction reputation and how we were getting roughly 130 billion through our dailies. That is the biggest single drip that will come out. So maybe this is an endgame mechanic. Maybe this is a mechanic in which you are not looking at your resources and materials and you're actually only looking at reputation. So it's definitely nice to have that as an additional source. And we'll go into our calculations of how we progress in faction. But to your point, DJs, the medals and plunder, yes, we need medals and plunder to upgrade any of these status control officers. And additionally, sourcing. Esri is being added to our medals refinery, as well as Nog. And so we'll have definitely an increased use of our medals in these. But the actual elite outposts themselves are going to be offering somewhere between 50 and 70% more medals just in base loot. So being able to attack the elite outpost for your medals and complete all the waves, it's going to give you a lot more medals to work with in order to figure out where you're going to spend that in the refinery. And also targeting the Fleet Commander Cisco skill that also grants more medals and plunders to be useful. Now, the plunder refinery has vastly increased. And I say vastly because of Fleet Commander Cisco and all of the relevant parts and pieces that make upgrading him possible. Sourcing him, his skill points, and the Sigma credits are all going to come from Plunder.
And the Fleet Commander seat. Yay!
Yes, and I was going to point that out. So as many players in our community will see that you'll have a free-to-play Fleet Commander slot. Put heavy quotations around free-to-play there, because it requires...
What do you mean? Let me click in here and see. It wants 1 million? A million plunder?
Yep.
Isn't a Vengeance 500,000
I mean,
plunder?
it'll take a minute.
Yep. You can get 2 Vengeances or 1 Fleet Commander slot.
Oh, no!
This is your stupid news segment of the day.
What's more important, a Fleet Commander seat or 2 Vengeances?
2.
Yeah.
You can get 2 of them.
Oh my word. Okay. Well, that's great.
Yeah. So now that that's been said, it also requires your Outpost Control Center building to be 61. So for our free-to-play or low-spend players, don't worry about it. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. Don't worry about it. Don't even look at it.
Well,
I mean, eventually, after you get to Outpost 61 and unlock 2 Vengeances, then you could, I mean, it could be definitely a long-term end game kind of mechanic here. But sadly, the comment that I've got on that, Jules, is simply, when I look at the Plunder Refinery, obviously Fleet Commander Cisco, his sourcing, the skill points, the Fleet Commander credits, or the Sigma Fleet Commander credits, rather, those are all important pieces of the loop right now. That's what I'm going to be focusing on right now. The problem is, for example, I saw on stream, or we had mentioned on stream last night, I just have not been spending my plunder. I've not been interested in obtaining a Vengeance. I just have not been. I still have yet to get on that Vengeance bandwagon. They just haven't made the Vengeance economy worth looking at yet. This will give me an opportunity to dump that plunder into something else, but my goodness, the cost. The Fleet Commander seat is arguably much more valuable to 100% of players.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, just no doubt in my mind. So I dislike the fact that they acknowledge that and double down on the price as if devaluing their own Vengeance. I'm not a big fan of that, and there will be conversations had on that. I cannot know whether or not this was an intended cost. I'm sure that it is, but it is definitely something that we can advocate for an adjustment on. It just seems really out of balance for me, Jules.
You can't make a seat worth 2 Vengeances.
And you made a comment of devaluating the Vengeance. I don't think it devaluates the Vengeance. I think it's just way overvalues this Fleet Commander slot. So definitely endgame mechanic for now, and we'll see if that actually changes in the future, or if sourcing and plunder somehow really drastically increases, which I sort of doubt. I did want to point out one other thing that the Elite Outpost provide that is new and different. You actually will get rare cores. So your Outpost control cores, which prior to this had only come through Battle Pass rewards, now actually drop in chests from the Outpost victory. So this is an immediate sustainable drip and sourcing. Does not require events to provide that for you, which is going to be great. However, the directives will come the same way the rare cores came currently through Battle Pass events and gifts. So we still don't have 100% stable sourcing of directives, but we now have stable sourcing of the rare cores to build up that building further.
Mentioning directives, we should go ahead and also point out that the Elite Outposts do have their own directive. So when we're talking about balance as to what you want to focus on, whether it would be the traditional outpost or the Elite Outpost, you're not necessarily going to have to balance anything other than time, in that you are going to be earning a separate directive for the Elite Outpost as compared to a traditional outpost. So by running an Elite Outpost, you are not taking away from your potential starts on a traditional outpost. It's really now going to be a matter of balancing your time or dedicating the certain number of ships you've got to possibly increasing the time that you spend with Outposts, as you will be able to run traditional and elites. The directive sourcing, the exact elite directive sourcing is not yet known, as Jules mentions Battle Pass and gifts at this time, but we don't. Jules, do we know what the cadence of starts is going to be, at least for this month of December?
We do not.
Perfect.
Yeah, so yeah, that is something we don't yet know at this point. So once that becomes a little bit more knowledgeable, then obviously that'll help the math a little bit, and obviously is going to determine how much plunder we can actually earn from these elite outposts. I would imagine that if we maintain our existing sourcing of running one traditional outpost every 2 days, I could only assume, Jules, that we're going to be running the elites less than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's an assumption, but I think that the elite outposts are also going to be more difficult. So I don't see a reason why they need to be sourced less.
Well, well, we didn't see a reason for Sigma Fleet Commander credits either, but we've got that. So
or $1 million cost for a slot.
I'm still asleep. I'm clearly still dreaming. Looking at that, I did not wake up. I apologize, everybody, for sleeping in.
You're not dreaming. You're having a night terror.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you.
Jules, as we take a look at this refinery, are there any other currencies or refineries that we want to call attention to with regards to retaliation metals or plunder before we switch over to status control team?
No, there's another trade down bundle now for the epic component cost. That's a new thing, is that the elite buffs actually shift their costs entirely from going from common through rare to now being uncommon through epic. And where you actually get those drops during the Elite Outpost interaction, you will get the common and rare through the loot. So that can be boosted through the lupus and primes and Fleet Commander skill. The epics is now going to be dropped in the chest. So you can get a vastly increased component income by also attacking the elites. And that it kind of pairs well with the vastly increased cost of running those buffs. So that's kind of where we see some of the balance there with buffs. But I just kind of want to point that out. I don't know how many people care about buffs at this time. I do think that the buffs themselves are probably more endgame mechanic or reasons to run these after you're done with all of your loot that you wanted out of the refineries, which will take years for most players. So not really an issue for now.
The one comment, and Griffin, I'd like your insight on this as we get ready to kind of wrap up the move on Outpost, is kind of a summation. Some players have heard me laying down kind of some sentiment hints over the last couple of weeks. Here's the thing in summary, and Jules, I'll get your wrap up thought on this here in just a moment. I don't see the Elite Outpost I don't see this as super exciting content. What I do see it as is an expansion of offerings that you will definitely have to shop for. And what I mean by that is there's no way in a timely fashion to get it all. What I see here is a clear push by Mr. Tiger for you to choose your path and to pick out one or two skills that are going to be notably worth it for you. And those are the ones that you're going to invest in up front. And that path is going to be divergent for a lot of players. I really think that the only thing that excites me about this particular mechanic is simply the divergence path, is that everybody has a choice. Everybody has an option as to what they're going to pursue, but those paths are not really going to overlap for any time in the foreseeable future because of the sheer cost and because of the timeline involved in some of these skills with fleet commanders and with Fleet Commander Cisco, and some of the cost and components and upgrades and this and that of the elite outpost and the plunder costs, etc. I see a very definitive, clear delineation in what players are going to be chasing. That might be what the intent was here, Jules. Again, I don't find this to be earth-shattering new content. What I see is an expanded store, but I'm only walking in with enough currency to be able to focus on one thing. And I'm going to have to save, and I'm going to have to scratch and earn and engage to accomplish that one thing. So what is that one thing that I really, really want? And that may be what the intent was here. It's certainly not an earth-shattering intent, but it does allow for divergent gameplay, and that may be what is the most interesting thing about these elite outposts. It's not that it's going to fundamentally change our core game forever, but it is going to improve a specific area of our game, and that specific area is going to be different depending on what you choose. Jules, do you see a different design intent here, or do we share that philosophy here?
No, we share that. The whole point from these game designers is to provide a mechanic that requires strategy and thinking. And I think they've done that. There is different loot types that have different value propositions and different ways to approach the outposts to target those loot types. So I do appreciate that they're sticking to the strategic goal of providing a interesting and intricate gameplay, and they're actually succeeding a bit on that. The value proposition is always the hardest part, and as Griffin loves to say, it's always the problem of Billy from accounting.
Well, it's like this, though. Here's the thing. Just like Cisco, the Outposts do provide a different path, and really this whole particular arc, it provides a path for no matter how you like to play. If you're PvE, you can go that way. If you're PvP, you can go this way. If you want to focus on the temple, which is the Outpost, you can go in this direction. And so there really is no most effective tactic available in terms of what your theme is going to be. You can choose your own adventure, and that part I like. And the other thing we haven't really talked about, DJ, is this one particular skill of Cisco, which adds a fourth ship potentially into attacking the outpost, causes you to completely reconsider how you're going to crew for a fleet of 4 instead of 3, or 3 instead of 2, but ultimately 4, going after these outposts. So there is a lot of adventure associated with the path you're going to choose, what ship you're going to bring, what officers are going to be below deck on each ship. So there are many things to keep us entertained this month in finding the true meta without having to have, double or triple the new additions to the game that we normally have. So in that regard, I'm excited to see what path everyone chooses and how people can find having their own fun.
Yeah, and I'm assuming soon we will have a Matters master course on crewing for more than 2 ships and outposts. So I look forward to that. I did want to point out I encourage all players who are frequent users of this Discord and our communities of nerds to make a copy of this Outpost Refinery sheet, because I've actually created a calculators tab. Essentially what this does is it tries to calculate how much metals and plunder that you're going to need, and actually how much you're going to need from each outpost interaction. And that math will change over time as we understand the cadence of both the regular and the elites, and as we add more bundles to this. It also gives you some loot calculations, because we've got 3 major types of loot, and each of them with a bunch of unique buffs. Now with multiple ships, each with their own loot types, it gets really complicated to really understand how much loot am I going to get from defeating X outpost. So there's a loot calculator in here, there is a cost calculator in here, and then there is the can I get what I need calculator, which just kind of takes both of those and says, here's my over under on that. Here's how much extra I can continue to bank for my officer upgrades. So that's the last thing I'll say about the spreadsheet. I hope you guys enjoy that and find some useful information there.
And there's such a labor of love associated with that. So thank you for doing that, Jules. It has really affected how I play my game, and I know it does for countless other commanders. So thank you very much for putting that together.
One thing that I'll point out with regards to that loot thing that you talk about in combination with the skill that Griffin was mentioning by adding a ship is, obviously by adding ships to your outpost does allow you to punch up, but is the math going to hold for you to actually earn more currency? This is what Jules was talking about just a second ago, because some of that currency is earned by defeating the outpost. Some of that currency is earned in loot chests from the retaliation targets. So running a loot crew with more ships could actually decrease the amount of loot that you pull by adding extra ships. So there's definitely going to be some subtle nuance and some math strategy built around that, which we will have to explore over time. Because running more ships is not necessarily the right answer if you're shopping for plunder and retaliation medals. But if you're shopping for the elite outpost credits, then it could be. If you're shopping for the building components that drop from the from defeating the outpost, then that could be important as well to have extra ships there. But then you're not going to be focused on loot. You're going to be focused on combat ability. So there's definitely some enhanced option and some strategy depending on what your target is. And again, I come back to the game design intent here. That particular piece of it I do find to be somewhat interesting in just simply there is not one path or one size that will fit all. As we get ready to wrap up here, Jules, let's switch quickly over to our new officer this month, Esri Dax, and taking a look at her combined with the changes that have happened to the hierarchy over the last 30 days. It does appear that Esri Dax is going to provide some notable improvement to the function of the hierarch, and possibly, is this a set of officers that you want to use together, or is the hierarch still designed to stand alone?
I think it's interesting now that they've dropped the requirement for a state, because you no longer need the hierarch's officer ability. It really, for that crew set, or for that crew, that particular officer, to have max effectiveness. However, Esri and Nog do need a state still. So that still provides the value of hierarch there in the first place. So I do think that it's interesting to kind of play around with how you arrange that crew, whether you're using hierarch and Esri as your main set from that crew, and then maybe you're using a stat officer on the other side, like Lorca, in order to provide more of a guarantee, particularly if you have a low tier hierarch. I think that's going to be quite effective as compared to depending on the hierarch granting that state for those officers. Also, I think it's, if you've seen the captain's ability, and if someone can read the exact text of the captain's ability.
I have it right here. It says Tegan mining defenses. Esri Dax increases isolated cascade damage by 1,500% when attacked by a player while on a survey.
Huge.
This is a minor strike team. This is what Hammy and Echo have joked about for 2 years coming into this game, coming into this arc right here. This is a minor strike team. When you look at 15,000% isolated cascade damage, but according to the napkin math, Jules, is actually going to allow a miner to possibly stand up to a relatively average warship. I mean, do we expect that this is actually going to put miners back on the combat path for defending their nodes?
To some degree, and I'll say that I think what I notice a lot in the Veil is people setting their specialty ships up there because they have a large cargo capacity and clearing systems out of their OPC. Now, you clear them out regardless of how much cargo they have, as I've saw from last night. But most players tend to actually go for the cargo. Now, they use specialty ships, which tend to not have a lot of hull health. But against miners, they haven't been a problem. Maybe this strike team, particularly for the G7 Veil, is actually meant to prevent that sort of cargo capture, meaning you're going to have to crew very well on a regular G6 or G7 warship and not take that much cargo, or you are going to have to be more creative with how you crew your own ships instead of just doing speed crews out there. So I think what I like about it is it's not going to prevent somebody from stealing your cargo. If they really want your cargo, they're going to crew up correctly and come get your cargo. But it's definitely a early warning system, because you're going to catch somebody off guard who just thought they could just pop your miner real quick, and it'll be like, nah, you didn't survive that one. Now I get to recall, keep all my cargo, and go back out there and continue mining. So I do think it's fun. I think it's gonna be fun. That's really where I think she's gonna work on miners.
How do you complete that crew? That's her plus Joachim on one side and who on the other?
Probably a status officer, because her captain's maneuver does not gain any synergy. So it does not matter if you have a status control team officer. So I would imagine a state officer or maybe something else. I'm not entirely sure.
And then regarding her officer ability, Grief Counseling, where Esri increases isolated cascade damage by up to 200% for 2 rounds, on round start against players, if the opponent has any state. Now, if you pair her with the hierarch, does that also mean that she won't proc until round 2?
No, because they're different officers entirely. And it was actually an issue with the captain's maneuver itself, not necessarily with the officer ability. It is weird how the battle engine works, and where, applying a state and checking for a state can kind of happen at different times. So I think we definitely need some testing, because when the hierarchy came out, we had an assumption that the officer ability would proc the captain's maneuver. And it wasn't until we were able to test it and prove that it wasn't, and actually take a look at the triggers for the officer ability to realize it wasn't doing that. So I could say all day long, oh, no, it should be fine. But until we actually put that crew together and actually test it is really the only way to truly verify.
There you go.
Well, definitely provides a little bit of interesting thought for Esri, and the fact that she is now earnable with Plunder, and that is essentially a free-to-play. Again, like Jules, I've got free-to-play in finger quotes, because again, how are you prioritizing your plunder? There's only so much plunder to go around, but now you will have the opportunity to source that officer as well here effective day one, just again with priority of your currency spend. So that may be a direction that some players go instead of the fleet commander slot, instead of unlocking 2 vengeances. Maybe you now focus on Esri. So definitely something that we could look at there, and we will experiment with her.
She's actually in metals. She's in metals now.
Oh, that's actually even better.
Yeah, and looking at where I'm spending my metals, I'm going to have a surplus of metals by running the elite and the regulars pretty often. So I'm actually not going to have an issue with pulling her and Nog and still my artifacts that I need. So I'm enjoying the fact that she was put in metals and not plunder, because plunder is heavily going to be needed for a long time, whereas metals will have a decreased value over time.
Okay, so that's actually a good move there, and allows a lot of players to potentially look at Esri relatively early on. So that is a good thing, and definitely going to probably encourage a lot of players to give her at least a second look there, maybe a little bit of side eye when it comes to sourcing Esri. I think that's an officer that players are going to want to acquire and probably want to tinker with, especially if you are heavy into mining. And getting your minor strike team kind of established there. She's definitely going to do that. All right. Do we have any other commentary, any other math or early strategy that we want to point out as we get ready to wrap up our December Talking in Cars with DJs, Griffin and Jules here on Retaliation Part 2?
I'm good, Jules. Anything else?
I think that's it. And I think as we get into actually running the elite outpost and figuring out what the right strategy is, crewing and stuff, and how to compare the difficulty levels, I know that Griffin's going to be spearheading that endeavor to kind of like do that math and figure out that comparison. So I'm excited to see and watch.
Well, there you go. And that is your beginning introduction. What you need to know to get started here in your December arc. I appreciate you guys all tuning in this morning. Thank you very much for being a part of our Arcfall content. Don't forget to go and check out UltimatDJz, who's going to be streaming this morning and a little bit later on Pergola Cam over on Griffin's channel, where we're going to be experimenting, and we'll be back with you tonight in the lab over on Twitching Trek as we continue our 24 hours of continuous content creator coverage from the Warp Drive 5, UltimatDJz, Tibbs, Scribbler, Major Samo, Iron Chef, Jesse, Mini Shamu, Quazo, Mord, and so many others. Thank you to an amazing creation team. Thank you for your content that you've dedicated yourself to over this 24-hour period. And we encourage you guys to all go check everything out. Visit our website at TalkingTrekSTFC.com for links over to our Twitch, the lab, and where you'll find this podcast coming up here just momentarily. Thank you to Griffin back in the studio, and thank you to our special VIP guest this morning, mad scientist Jules Verne. My name is UltimatDJz for all of us here at Talking Trek. Thank you for listening to this episode of Talking in Cars with DJs, a subsidiary of the Talking Trek podcast, and recorded in front of a live studio audience for distribution across podcast platforms everywhere. I'm your friendly neighborhood cat person saying meow for now. Love you, mean it. Happy Arcfall Day, everybody. Have a great one. We'll see you later on tonight.